In addition to the opening scenes of the movie, the ending was also built up by Ed and Lorraine's college lectures. During one of the talks, they showed footage of an exorcism, explaining in detail the way the victim ended up killing himself. But then they also break down the stages of demonic activity. As they describe infestation and oppression, it's obvious that Carolyn feels that her family is in the later stages. Somewhere in the middle, maybe? The end of the movie is laid out right there for the audience. It's all set up earlier in the movie. There are several elements to the ending, especially to understand the ending. To better organize this section, I will lay out the following subsections: foreshadowing, the final music box scene, the culmination of scenes, the Warren's daughter, setting up the exorcism, wrap up, and based on a true story. During the lecture, the camera specifically zooms on Carolyn while Ed explains that a victim will be targeted due to their psychological vulnerability. It continues zooming on her until he describes the final stage. This scene not only foreshadows the ending for the movie, it actually explains a possible way Carolyn can be saved. She needs something to live for. The good memory was shown earlier in the beach photo with Lorraine. Carolyn can be saved. I think it's also worth noting that Carolyn shakes the hand of Lorraine but not Ed. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but it's interesting given that Ed is the exorcist at the end of the movie. Maybe this indicates a demonic influence this early in the movie. Or it could just be a coincidence. Immediately before the ending climax, the music box scenes culminate in a scene where Lorraine is in the basement in the dark. She had fallen down there, she's alone, and Ed and the family search for her throughout the house. They don't know where she went. The scene begins with the familiar creepy music, but as Lorraine looks in the reflection, she sees a woman with a knife and a dead child. Then the camera shifts, and we can see that the apparition is actually behind Lorraine. It isn't clear if this is Lorraine's perspective or the perspective of reality, but the audience is made to believe they're one and the same. When Lorraine turns to physically see the ghost, it's gone. This sets up a jump scare. As she moves the music box, there it is. This scene is important to understand because it shows how jump scares should be used in horror. To effectively scare the audience, the jump scare needs to be made by something the audience understands is dangerous. The apparition was previously shown to be dangerous because it was holding a dead child and a bloody knife. It was shown to be in reality because of the camera angle that showed it outside of the music box. So when the jump scare occurs, it was not only the fulfillment of Lorraine's being alone, but the audience's previous apprehensions in regards to the music box. The scare doesn't feel cheap either, because the audience empathizes with Lorraine and her situation. If it had been a cat instead of a ghost, the audience would understand that this was not a scary thing, and the scare becomes like a cheap carnival ride scare. While the final music box scene was the culmination of previous music box scenes, the same can be said for the use of the hanging woman in the basement. This scene is the conclusion of the previously seen hanging woman scene when Lorraine and Ed are outside by the tree. Likewise, the fact that Lorraine's necklace was grabbed in that scene is also no accident. When Lorraine explains that Carolyn is being possessed, the crosses begin to fall down. Once again, this is a culmination of the scenes before, with Ed putting down crucifixes while talking. The demon then attacks Nancy, and the Warrens have the evidence the church needs to send an exorcist. There is another culmination as well. The personal nature of the story in the opening text scroll wasn't fully explained until late in the movie, when the Warrens' daughter Judy is being targeted by the spirits. One interesting scene is when Lorraine is by the water and she sees Judy, her daughter, float by. The symbolism is similar to the river Styx in Greek myth. She tries to get her daughter out of there, but she's simply splashing in the water. Once again, theming is important to the movie, and the mother-daughter relationship is one that's explored in detail. The demon possesses mothers and kills their children. As a result, there is a threat here, an unseen threat that kills children, This is made more apparent when Lorraine explains that she saw an entity with them as she walked through the house. Likewise, the picture shown to the priest shows an apparition with its hands on the kids, that same danger. It should have been apparent that this was a danger to the Warrens themselves, their family, but it doesn't seem to occur to them until late in the movie. Lorraine's necklace being grabbed there should have been a strong hint, and when she saw her daughter Judy in the water, she knew her daughter was in danger. The audience is then shown Judy in her room, in a scene very reminiscent of the earlier scenes with Christine. Then Judy decides to look for her Nana to comfort her. A crucifix is prominently displayed on the stairs. When the area grows dark, she runs for cover, and the thing knocks on the door while Judy screams. Once again, this is reminiscent of an earlier scene, specifically the Annabelle opening. And the audience was fully prepared because of this to see Annabelle once again. It's worth pointing out that this reveal is used to great effect in the movie. James Wan likes to hide entities or revelations behind other objects, and then either move the object themselves or the camera to reveal what the object was hiding. He did this earlier with the music box, setting up the jump scare, and again here with the lamp. Well, the spirit throws a rocking chair at Judy, but Ed comes in and protects her from it. This won't be the last time furniture is thrown at him. This is important as well because Nancy was being physically attacked by the demon, so the audience understands that the stakes have become dangerous. Between the danger towards Nancy and now Judy, a possessed Carolyn taking the girls and driving to their house becomes a very dangerous threat. When the Warrens approach the house, Brad drives before them and uses his siren. This has added psychological understanding to the audience that it's a very dangerous situation. You hear sirens, you think of danger. Now, it would be very easy for the next few scenes to be very derivative of The Exorcist. But James Wan does a good job of making it his own. Now, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but the light from the window in this scene flashes across Lorraine's back in a silhouette of a cross. Just a neat little thing I noticed. Carolyn, after they foil her murder of Christine, is then dragged out the door, and we see a rope mark appear on her neck and a number of burns on her body. The witch, or demon, or whatever, is not letting them take her out of the house. It's interesting that it's a rope burn around her neck, a nice little nod to the suicide by hanging that occurred previously. So Carolyn is dragged into the house by the spirit, and it looks very similar to how Nancy was being dragged by her hair earlier. And also Judy and Christine have both been tugged by their legs. I especially like the lighting when Lorraine steps forward. It's a classic lighting of the eyes to symbolize observation. With April missing, Drew attempts to find her while the rest go down into the basement after Carolyn. After Lorraine and Ed fight over the exorcism, there's an interesting camera angle choice. Remember how before I talked about the high angles being oppressive and signifying that the characters on screen are being dominated by something? Well, James Wan uses a new kind of shot in the ending. The camera begins upside down and flips as the character passes under. This not only holds the same oppression as before, but it also contains an unnatural suggestion in the upside down perspective. You could see an upside down shot used prominently in the opening to Devil, which also dealt with demonic forces. However, this shot also moves into a shot of Drew still looking for April, a move for the camera which is brilliant in how it reminded the audience that the exorcism isn't the only thing going on. But the camera angle is used again, this time in the reverse as Lorraine returns to the scene of the exorcism. It's interesting that as she left the house, the camera went right side up, and then when she entered in, the camera went upside down. The limited lighting in the basement is an interesting choice, and it suggests a single light in the darkness. It also evokes a hopelessness and a danger that comes with having a single light source. It casts high contrast shadows and distinctive lines on the actors' faces that could easily have been avoided with reflective lighting. But this was an aesthetic choice for the director. He chose to do it this way. This has the added benefit of the Warrens casting large shadows behind them, which even covers Brad and Roger as they begin the exorcism. I touched on the bird scene in the previous parts, but it bears repeating that the sound of the crows is used while the birds shown are pigeons. It's also interesting that Drew hears 3 thumps against the house before the bird flies in by his head, and another one crashes into the window. A knocking in 3s has already been established as being important to the plot. While the exorcism rages inside the house and birds swirl around the house on the outside, Drew hears April through the floor. She's the only daughter left in the house, so the setup is made clear to the audience. Once again, we also have an upside-down shot, specifically this time from the perspective of the possessed Carolyn. It's also worth noting that where before the single light showed Lorraine and Ed with a large black shadow, now the levitating Carolyn, possessed by a spirit, casts a large shadow of her own. And then once again, Ed gets attacked by furniture, indicating thematically that this is the same thing that attacked Judy. Or James Wan just likes hitting Ed with furniture. Bathsheba, a witch or demon or whatever it is in actuality, is exorcised by Ed and Lorraine. Roger also calls out to Carolyn, and Lorraine finishes the job by reminding her of the beach day memory, which was very important to Carolyn. This continues the theme of family in the movie, which is ultimately what defeats the spirit. One interesting note is that Carolyn is touched by Lorraine from above, and as Lorraine reaches down to Carolyn in the darkness, a single ray of light beams down, almost in a heavenly display. It's also interesting that April was able to tell when her mother was safe, because you can hear her call out to her after she had expelled the spirit. April gives Lorraine her necklace back, indicating that the families are safe. After the Warrens return home, you can see clear pictures of birds on the wall. It seems to me that one or both of them love birds, so maybe the usage of birds by the spirit was to attack them as some sort of bastardization of their beloved animal. I'm not sure. I'm still trying to figure out the reasoning for the usage of the birds. The movie ends with a shot of the music box. After all the spiritual issues are sorted out, Ed keeps it in order to keep people safe, as he said in the beginning of the movie. The box is shown closed, as Ed and Lorraine leave to discuss another case, specifically the Amityville case. But when the camera returns to the music box, it's not only open, but playing a song. The camera zooms in on the mirror portion, and the movie ends with the sound. Before I close out this series, I want to explain that Bathsheba originates from the Hebrew story of King David, who saw a married woman bathing and decided to commit adultery. In Hebrew, the name Bat or Bath means daughter. It's an interesting name choice, considering the attempt by a mother to kill her daughter in the movie. The second part, Sheba, means oath, so her name means daughter of the oath. For a witch to have the name, it works on many levels. The obvious connection to sin is apparent, as in the sin of King David. But the connection to being a daughter of an oath also works. The oath in this case would be a demonic pact, and the use of the word daughter is an interesting one as well. However, the story already existed before the script to the movie did. Bathsheba Sherman was a real person who had that name, and she was accused of horrible things in this movie. In reality, the actual person named Bathsheba doesn't seem to have been accused of witchcraft in her lifetime. In fact, she was buried alongside her family. She also drafted a will and seems to have been a normal person in it. Some of the deaths claimed to have happened on the parents' property also don't seem to link up with the story. Historically, many of these didn't occur on the property, including the death of Bathsheba herself, which occurred next door to their property, and it wasn't a suicide either. A big thanks, by the way, to dreamingcasuallypoetry.blogspot.com for the investigation into the historical figures behind The Conjuring. I'll place a link in the description below. Well, to conclude this series, I want to express my love of this movie and its director, James Wan. While I don't think this movie is perfect, in fact, I don't think there is such a thing as a perfect movie, I truly believe much can be learned about making horror films by studying it. I didn't go into the editing techniques used, because that's a whole series in on its own. Plus, I'm still learning more about them. But I'm familiar enough with lighting and camera techniques that I can pick up on the intended audience impressions given by them. So I hope you learned something through this. Once again, my name is Frank, and I really appreciate all of this. Stay tuned for my next film analysis, in which I tackle a hated director's cult classic that I think should also be studied. Subscribe for that. Thank you so much.